Good morning, everyone. I think we'll still have a few people trickling in the next few minutes after they've had a hearty breakfast, but I thought we should start in the interest of time. My name is Lisa Jain. I look after the operations of the College Board in India. Thank you so much for coming to our session first thing in the morning. We're very excited and I have a fantastic panel here with me. Our topic for today is efficient and effective tools to help guidance counselors manage their calendar in crunch times. We promise to make this as interactive as possible once we get through our experts giving us some exciting tips to manage the time. For those of you who might not know the College Board, although I'm hoping all of you do, we're the owners and creators of the SAT, which I think everyone's familiar with. And we also have other programs like the PSAT and AP, but this session's not about the College Board. Happy to help you with anything you want to know about our programs later. Quick introduction of the panelists for today. We have four panelists with us in alphabetical order. We have Bhaveen Gupta. Bhaveen, if you could just wave. She's from Modern School Barakhamba, which follows the CBSE curriculum. Bhaveen's got over 20 years of counseling experience. We have Miss Nina Vermani from the Pathways World School, Aravali, Gurgaon, which is an IB school, and Miss Vermani again has over several decades of experience in counseling, so has a lot of insights. We then have Shivangi on the extreme right, Shivangi Panchal from Ahmedabad International School, which has a Cambridge and IB curriculum and state curriculum as well. Shivangi's has about a decade of experience in counseling, is also the IB coordinator and was part of the founding team at this school. And then we have Ms. Sudarshana Shukla from the Cathedral and John Connon School in Mumbai, which for a long time followed the AP and ISC curriculums and now also has IB. She does a ton of things at school. If I list everything out, it'll take me a few minutes, so I'll avoid doing that. But she'll talk to us a little bit about how she dons different hats later in the presentation. What we really wanted to achieve today was talk about how experienced counselors over the course of their careers have found intelligent ways to plan better so that when it comes to crunch time, those few weeks and months before application deadlines hit us, they don't go crazy. What do they do for many years in advance so that they don't go crazy in those last few weeks and months? We were having an interesting discussion this morning about how do you define crunch time. For many schools, it could start as early as July or August because you have kids who are going to start thinking about their early decisions, early actions. The deadlines for that are as early as mid-October. For some schools, you might not have that many kids who think about EDEA. They might be doing regular deadline applications for the US, and then you have a little bit more time. But broadly speaking, the crunch time does last for a significantly long period of time, right? Before we get into how some of these experienced counselors manage that for themselves, we just want to get a quick show of experience levels within the room. So how many of you have less than 2 years of counseling experience? A couple of you. How many of you have between about 2 to 5 years of experience in counseling? 5 to 10 years? Okay, and more than 10 years. This is interesting. You've come in to listen to other experts when you're quite the expert yourself. This is good. We can have more of an interaction then. I think one of the things that's key to remember is crunch time doesn't need to be a nightmare if you plan well in advance. If you've put in years of systematic planning, if you've been very organized, crunch time does not need to be the sort of crazy frenzy that very often it is. And what we decided to do today is talk about a few broad themes and talk about sort of intelligent ways that some of the counselors in our panel have dealt with this process so that it becomes smoother for them, for the students, for the parents, as well as for the teachers who are going to be involved in that application process as well. So we'll start off with sort of the first theme, which is making sure you're not owning the entire process, right? You give that ownership to the students, make them be accountable. And the two broad themes really that we wanted to talk about in that, I think the first is an interesting thing that Ms. Vermani told me she does yesterday, which is making the students feel a little bit responsible and accountable for the decisions they take. So Ms. Vermani, if you could talk a little bit about how you do that.
All right. Hello. Can you hear me? Now, before I start further, I mean, this is over a period of time because I've been working with students from IB and students who were fresh for IB program. So they were going through a process of getting used to IB and at the same time getting used to the idea of applying overseas for their college application. Quite a few of them, and I'm talking from the environment that we have up in the north, a lot of students do a lot of research outside the school environment to do their college application. Now, as a responsible person from the school, where I believe accountability is of prime importance, there had to be some systems created where we could make sure that the students who were doing college applications did not at any point come back and point a finger at the responsible person in school saying that something went wrong there, so that is why I was not able to meet deadline. It's always very easy. So going back, when we do our process, we have a very clear understanding between students and the person on the other side of the table. In addition to that, the parent body and the student body, we go to the extent of explaining to them the whole process. We have evening programs, we have morning sessions, we have breakout sessions, we also have form sessions where everybody's presence is mandatory. Literally, we have a system where we pass through papers, signatures of attendance to make sure that whatever was informed in that session has been taken in. We send soft copies, we send hard copies, we go to the extent of saying, okay, now you cannot come back and say you were not informed. And the students definitely. A little bit of signature on the documents that are handed over to the students. Now that responsibility is primarily for a person to understand, because we found that, and I learned that from my school director, that when a person sign, there's a little bit of responsibility and a little care taken on the part of the student. So I personally believe that once a student has done that, signed on the deadlines, signed on the dates, there is definitely a little more sense of urgency when the time comes in. So we don't always end up at the last time or at the last date getting your application going. So that is something which I thought was very important.
Fantastic.
To me, I think,
yeah, thank you. Bhaveen, I wanted you to talk a little bit about sort of the different documents, the extensive documentation that you make your students do on your Google Drive folders. Specifically, one that I found interesting when we were chatting earlier is Bhaveen calls it a brag sheet, right, where students have to sort of document everything great about themselves that they want to include in the application. So I'd love for you to throw some light on how you use those documents as a way for students to take ownership of the process.
Yeah, so the brag sheet is just an anecdote that they want to remind the teacher, and very often that anecdote can be in sync with the rest of the work they are doing, which the teacher doesn't get to see. For example, your essay could have something, and your anecdote sort of relates to that. So it corroborates with that purpose. It gives a sync to the entire application. So anecdotes are very important. It also helps the teacher make the letters more personal. But before the brag sheet part, I'd like to start off by saying that the first thing I do with the student is say, make a resume, or at least bullet point your extracurricular activities. So we give out 6 documents which are put up on the Google Plus. There's a community. I have the student community there. I put up these sheets there. They print it out, they bring those to us. So the first one is a student profile, which gives just their demographic details as well as the country they want to apply to, because in my CBSE school, students apply to at least 2 countries minimum. And by the time they end up, they have 4. Like they have in UK, US, Canada, Singapore, then they throw in Hong Kong, so like that. So which are the countries you want? At least few dream colleges on that one sheet. So I give a little picture of the student, what he's looking at. And then the second document is activity list. Activities you've done inside school and those you've done outside of school. The ones outside of school, they list it, it's an Excel sheet. They show me the certificates or any kind of verification that they did that. And the activities in school, the particular teacher concerned has a column where she just puts the initials there. Otherwise, how does a teacher know which are the activities and is it related? So that is another thing. The resume, if you want to list one out, then there is a brag sheet. You just said brag sheet also says give some adjectives of which describe yourself best. So again, those are words which the student wants in his letter of recommendation. So literally the teacher's letter of recommendation and the counselor's letter of recommendation comes up with these sheets.
Fantastic. Thank you, Paveen. And I think that's a great way to sort of go and transition into the next sort of theme that I really wanted us to touch upon, which is the counselor is also in this tricky position where you're sort of coordinating between the students and the teachers in your school for the several teachers' recommendations that have to be written. Some of us deal with the reality of teachers not necessarily being very comfortable with that writing process, and you also have to intervene, maybe hold workshops for them and find ways to support them so that the student's application is stronger and the teacher recommendation isn't actually sort of drifting away from what it needs to be. We discussed this extensively yesterday, and I think what sort of struck me was two schools do it very differently. One of them gives teachers that sort of ownership process of getting information. The other puts that responsibility on the student's head, right? So I wanted to start off with Mrs. Shukla from Cathedral and John Connon, where students have to do a lot of homework at their end to make sure that they get the letters of recommendation from teachers that they'd like to get.
The way we work at our school for letters of recommendations is slightly different from what you've heard so far. We have very experienced teachers who've been with us for a very long time. I think that helps as opposed to a large turnover in some schools. So we have our teachers are very familiar with this, what the students are looking for. What we do is we have to we've created a teacher recommendation form for this that the students fill out, and that form begins with the name of the student, the colleges that they're applying to, whether they're going to be looking at early decision, early action, and it may be tentative, but roughly they need to give it in, and we actually take it in by July 1st. Just to make sure that we are not rushing with their exam schedules, paper corrections, because teachers also have their own set of duties that they are responsible to execute on time. So we give it out for the early decision students, we give it out by July 1st. For the regular decision students, we give it out by Diwali. So October 3rd week is usually when we give it out. What is expected is we don't focus so much on the CV, because typically the teacher is not supposed to list what's on the child's CV. It's the child's responsibility to put that in the activities section. So while the student creates a CV, we really don't focus on giving that to the teachers at all. What we do is have the student list all their activities that they've done related to their interests and talents. So transferable talents that they've acquired from the activities that they've done. Just to give you a concrete example and not being vague about it, supposing you're a good orator, that's a transferable skill you've acquired from acting, elocuting, munning, and the rest of it. So if you've been from 8th grade a consistent either debater, elocutor, munner, etc., or actor, then you're showing some sort of excellent communication skills. And so when the teacher writes about the student, they need to focus on the transferable skill rather than what they've done. And the teacher also needs to talk about their experience in the classroom with the student to sort of corroborate that. And for that, I feel that the teachers who are dealing with, say, in the IB classes from 2 to 7, that's not 2 to 7 numbers, is not difficult to do because they really know the kids in and out. But in an ISC setup where there are between 26 to 38 children, it becomes kind of difficult to remember what every kid did over 2 years. or maybe even for 4 years if you've had the same teacher teaching you from the ninth grade. And so what we do is have the student, so if there are 4 teachers they're going to, or 2 teachers they're going to for recommendation, I sit with them and we list out activities that they want the teacher to focus on. So teacher A, we list out a certain set of activities that the teacher knows the child in context really well, and teacher B would address completely different aspects of the child. So there's no really overlap between what the 2 teachers are saying about the same child. And that's the idea when you submit different letters of recommendation, to show that there's no repetition in the voice. And so I have children list out anecdotes that happened in class to jog the teacher's memory, especially if they were in the 11th grade, early part of the 11th grade. For example, if there's a new student who joined us and they had some adjustment problems and they had a mentor who helped them, or had a teacher who helped them through that process, specifics like that. And then if there was a question that came up in class which the student had had a query about, and asked the teacher to elaborate, and then got the whole class thinking and did some referencing outside, went beyond the text, then they need to list that out just to jog the teacher's memory. So just small things like this which really help demarcate things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Shukla. And Shivangi, at your school, you sort of take a slightly different approach, where students take ownership with sort of the details that they provide, the anecdotal details, right, to the teachers.
And just to add, so we do something similar, but we also add for the teachers. In my school, what I make sure is that since they teach the child over 2 years, we make sure that we have a monthly anecdotal record coming from the teacher to us. So, that keeps, they have to write something, 2 lines on some activity that has been done by the student, just so that they are also aware and it is recorded. And so at the end of that 1.5 or 3 semesters, they have not forgotten or missed on something. Whether the child needs the recommendation from that teacher or not doesn't matter, but at least we have a record. So even for our records, it helps also for the LORs, and it kind of keeps the teacher, I would say, a little more alert in what they're doing in the class and identifying with the student, because many times we have teachers who are not so good with their writing skills. So it so happens that a physics teacher, for example, may not be able to elaborate much, and all the physics LOR looks the same. So at least if the records are there over the months, then we have different activities or events that have happened in the class where the child has participated particularly in a different manner, then we have it recorded somewhere and you can use that as the starting point.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes. Veen, could I request you to use the mic, please?
We also do regular teacher recommendation workshops, just to remind them why they are writing that letter of recommendation.
Fantastic.
And in addition to that, just adding all that we are doing, this is something I do with all my grade 11 students. I start telling them the moment they come to grade 11 that this is going to be an important part of your application. So please start your list of things where you believe you have been able to outshine the rest of your members of your class, especially subject-wise. And without taking any offense with any teacher who's writing. So when you make a request to that teacher, I always like to be kept in a CC. This is something which I've been doing from very beginning, and I believed it worked. I do make every student write a polite mail to every teacher with that anecdotal saying, dear teacher, etc., etc. I mean, if it's a physics teacher, year this, I did this, year this, I did this, and a little bit of self-analysis if he has any, let's say, skills based on physics which he can highlight. No harm in sending those words to the teacher with his analytical skills or critical whatever. So that kind of gives a little support to the teacher. Now this is not spoon feeding the teacher, just informing. Because what I have found in international school where I am working, there are times there is a turnover of staff. And a teacher gets a student, probably she's never taught in grade 12 or 11, sorry. So this kind of thing helps, and I keep that CC with me so that it can be, the teacher knows that I'm in the loop and there's nothing being done which is against.
Fantastic.
It works then.
Thank you, Mr. Ramani. The next thing that we wanted to sort of touch upon is a reality that many counselors in schools face, which is that they're not just a career guidance counselor. They're also teaching, they're also doing psychological counseling, they might be doing a ton of other things in school. How many of us have more than one role at school with counselors? Exactly, right? So you all resonate with what I'm talking about. I wanted Mrs. Shukla to talk about this a little bit because I have seen her in her office. She's the AP coordinator. She's a head of the Learning Resource Center. She's a special needs coordinator. She is a counselor with more than 100 students in a graduating class. And I know that over the years, she sort of developed these quick hacks and smart ways to manage her time so that she doesn't go crazy in those last few months in the crunch time. So, Mr. Shukla, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that.
So Lisa forgot one more, a maths coordinator from 8th grade to 10.
Oops, I should have created a resume for you.
But yeah, actually I think you can manage and find time if you're passionate about what you do. Quite honestly, I love every hat I wear, and I work I'm a stickler. Like, I don't know, some of you were there yesterday in Barry and my session. I'm OCD as well, and so I really have a checklist for each department. So on my laptop, there are folders for each departments where um, we have departmental meetings, minutes, tasks to do monthly, weekly, daily. And so I think if you're organized, have a checklist and a task list for every hat you wear, automatically it's like telling the children to make an activity sheet which makes sense, right? I mean, you have 24 hours in a day, and I've had students, just to digress a little bit, students come to me a few years ago and now they know they can't do that because I have a template for them to say that you're in school for 10 hours, or not 10 hours. You're in school from 8 o'clock in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. You have activities for a couple of hours, you sleep for 6 to 8 hours, and so there's only so much you can do. And then if you're going to list activities which add up to more than 24 hours in a day, it doesn't make sense. And so even for us who have multiple roles to play in an institution, if you sort of demarcate days or slots of times or appointments, so all my parent appointments happen not during my school time, but happen from 2:30 to 5:30 in the evening. So which means I do stay longer, but at least I'm not mixing things up during the day. I know when Lisa visited us the last time, I was in and out with parent meetings, but those were meetings. So there are exceptions to the rule. It's not, nothing is carved in gold, in stone. The thing is, during, when we have IB admissions or ISC admissions, there are parents who come and want to check on the subject choices. So you have to have certain amount of flexibility. And that was when Lisa visited me. So I was literally in and out of my office every couple of sessions in between wherever she called me in. But I even work on a Saturday if it comes to a crunch, which I think I do it out of choice. So there's literally nothing to complain about. But I believe that if you have a checklist, if you have an appointment schedule, somebody to help you support your managing your appointments and college visits, which we have plenty of happening in the next couple of months, it should be, I think it's quite manageable. So, and I'd love to, this is just not a one-way talk. If there's anyone else who's experienced something else and would like to share at the end of the session,
Absolutely.
we're very welcome to.
Our intent is to have
share.
at least 15 to 17 minutes for an open conversation. And I'm happy to say we're running right on track with time, so that's good. Just a couple of more themes that I wanted us to get through in terms of getting insights before we open this out. There are many other stakeholders in this entire process outside of the school, right? The biggest stakeholder, the elephant in the room, of course, is a parent. And we all have different kinds of experiences with parents. Sometimes it's supportive, sometimes it can be a bit difficult and challenging, and that's the reality of the roles that you all play in schools. Ms. Ramani, I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you involve parents early on. I know you touched upon it a little bit in the beginning, but how many times a year do they come in consciously for you to interact with them about career counseling?
I'll take it up from where Sudarshana just said. So what we do is I believe in trickling it backwards. So I've been working and I insist that we start working with the student as early as we can and always involve the parents in the first meeting if possible.
Yeah.
So it is again, the time spills over, we have late evenings, we have timings fixed for them. Grade 8 onwards is how we start spreading out, meeting out the parents, getting them involved in the basic process, which really starts from selection of subjects, futuristic views, aspirations, ambition, where you want to see, and what would be the proper path, or they believe the path would be. Is kind of having each parent along with the student kind of draw out a timeline or a plan as to where they are, and then, in a period of, depending on the grades they are in, set up a next plan. Very often I have parents who are very enthusiastic and wanting to connect back with you. Can we come back to you in a month's time? So you really have to give them that confidence and say, all right, we are there, we'll handhold you your plans. Work on it, set your timelines, get back to me. I'm giving you 2 months. I mean, always make a time plan. But then once they come to grade 11, it becomes a little more aggressive. And I make sure that parents, once we are working on a time plan or what our direction towards college application, they are fully aware of what will be the steps required, what will be the responsibility of the school, what is the student's responsibility, and as parents, I always tell them you're a resource. And I do put this point to the students that look, here is a resource, see what your parents are capable of supporting you, whether it is giving you extra time or extra support or even editing your essays, what's wrong with that? Or giving you support. So that's how we move forward. Definitely bringing the parent into it, and if not more, at least I make sure that in grade 11 we have 2 meetings per parents, and as we get on, depending on the parent need, then we move forward. That's
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mrs. Shukla, if you could briefly talk about, and Viveen, I would like you to follow after that, how you found ways to involve your ex-students, because of course once they've gone off to the US or the UK, they're distracted with more joyous things going on in their lives, so it must be harder to integrate them into the system. But really for students, I think the best and most trustworthy resource will always be their friends from a year above. So how do you find some ways to make sure they are involved in the process to help students plan early and learn from experiences?
I think the students who go to colleges are really the best ambassadors for the college they represent, and also ambassadors for the school where they went from, to later on get acceptances. If they've been good students, the colleges come back. So it works both ways. And so every time, fortunately, I think we have, Cathedral has a very, very strong alumni network, which goes back to many, many years ago. We also have regional networks formed by alumni associations. So just to give you one example of a regional network that we have is in the Boston area. We have a Cathedral Alumni Boston Area Club, which supports children who've graduated and are working, and children who are studying at the moment get internships, get job opportunities, get externships, and things like that. So I depend a lot on my ex-students to come back and share their experiences with the colleges that they're currently studying in. So every time they're back in December or in summer, we utilize they come on their own, frankly, because they've experienced that in the previous years, and so they know how helpful that was. I also have a student panel on our career day where we have 2 panels, the UK and the US student panels, where the students who've just joined as freshman year students talk about their experience and their journey in the application process, how important it is to start on time, how important it is to respect our timelines and not the college set timelines. We have our own timelines, so they talk about their experiences. We also have a LinkedIn group for Cathedralites where, I'm the one who invites them, and then we have a common platform where everybody supports everybody in whichever way they want. And this includes, so we have one student group for Cathedralites, we have one teacher group for Cathedralites, And I think that again helps because if there's a teacher who's just come from somewhere else, even if it's tons of experience, there's a cultural difference, So I mean, simply talking about even cultural differences between the north and the west or the east or the south, and the exposure of the parents that they've had. So most of our parents are parents who studied overseas. So to keep them busy, and they really then get anxious and want to take over. I mentioned this yesterday as well. I just have the parents open their own accounts on the Common App, so they're busy doing their own thing, and they leave the students alone to do their own Common App. So I think there are ways in which you can engage the parents, keep them happy. And I'm a parent of the Cathedral and John Connon as well, but I feel the difference between my time and now is stark. I mean, when my children applied, all I knew was the list of colleges they were applying to, and that was that. I had no idea what they were doing. They were doing everything on their own. And now I think the parents really want to know what their children are doing, and how to help them. And again, cultural difference. Some of our students just refuse to share anything with their parents, and they think they know everything, and parents are really not necessary at this time to get into their busy schedules. So for those parents, I think it's not fair to the parents to just leave them hanging high and dry when they're the ones who are paying, coughing up the big amounts. So, again, as a counselor, my role is to make sure I bridge that gap and keep the parents happy, keep them involved. I really think it's important for the parents to know what's going on, but at the same time, not to get so involved in the students' application that they just turn everything around for them.
Fantastic. Bhaveen, your thoughts on how you engage with ex-students, because modern school again has a very large cohort of students who are spread across the world. So how do you integrate them into the process early?
When they get their admissions, when they get their, so we have all the entire class, the graduating class, there to listen to them. So they tell their best practices. They get together 5-6 of them, which are got say in highly selective colleges, and they give their talk on what worked best for them. They do things like rate, make a checklist of each one giving what worked best for him, what he thinks was most important for him. Was it the essay? Was it the letter of recommendation? Was it the activity list? So they literally do that. And they also sit in my office for 2 weeks at a time, which is advertised for the students' timings, where students who are applying to similar colleges can come and have a one-on-one with them and understand how to, and help. They basically help those students make their university and college list.
Fantastic. One of the things that came up in our conversation yesterday when we were planning is, strangely, I think Cathedral, Modern, and Pathways all have very large cohorts of students who apply overseas. Many of us are dealing with a slightly different reality, where we might have just 5, 6, 10, 15 students applying overseas. Shivangi works at Ahmedabad International School, which is slightly smaller cohort of students applying, and there are some unique challenges which come with that. One would imagine that if you have a lesser number of students, your life is easier, but there are some unique challenges associated with that, and I'd like Shivangi to talk about a couple of them and how starting early helps overcome some of those challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. And the main point I would stress here is that though we are a small school, we hardly have. We have about 100 graduating class, but it's a mix of Cambridge and IB and State Board. So there are about 30-40 students who want to apply abroad. But the ED factor, I make sure that I try to. I mean, it's not a strict rule or as a policy, but I try to make sure that not the same two children are applying, at least from the same board, ED to the same college, maybe for the same course. It could be College of Engineering and Arts and Sciences, that's all right. But if it's College of Engineering and both are applying for College of Engineering, then I try to deviate and think and give them options, because it doesn't make sense according to me, because we're very small a school and people know us. I mean, the Ivy Leagues also know us, the good universities know us. So sending two is somehow, we've had this feeling, and we have had the reaction that none of them have either gotten. I haven't got a time that both have gotten. Yes, I have got 2 or 3 getting into the same university on a regular basis, but not on an ED basis. So,
right. How early do you start this process of sort of making sure the planning is such that you won't end up with the kids applying to the
my
same college?
always I tell them to email me because that also they want to keep it secretive. Who's applying where? So they don't want to share anything with their friends that who's applying where, and especially the ED. And since because it is for me and in my school that okay, I will not allow that. If I have a candidate, then I'll say that okay, according to their SAT scores, according to their overall performance, we'll see who we will push. Because we're going to be kind of writing the same things for them if they are all at par. If I have a 40, 41 on IB student, then and both applying for engineering, then I mean there is a limitation to what one can write for them. So we give them all that. So then by end of July, they need to email me as to which is going to be their choice for an ED if at all. So we do that process, and I think so far we have been successful. Sometimes parents do come up and say, no, you're limiting their choice, and it's our discretion whether we want to take. But then I make it very clear that it's at your risk, because then they cannot come back and blame us on it that, okay, we didn't push it enough. So that is one thing that we make sure that is conveyed very clearly to them, that you're doing it at your own. For us, both the kids are as important. And we would value each one's all the activities that they do and the effort they put in. And when they are at that level, of course they are driven children, but then the parents need to know that it's not that it's one over the other for us.
Fantastic, thank you. Bhaveen, I'd like to turn to you really as sort of the last theme before we open for questions and interaction, which is what we've called a testing problem. And the reason I called it as that is because in one of our conversations yesterday, Bhaveen pointed out to me a very interesting problem that she faces with CBSE. That a lot of kids, because of the way the CBSE syllabus aligns with SAT subject tests, she could do all the planning in the world for many months and many years, but then you'll have kids who will wait till October of class 12 to take their subject tests, because the syllabus by then is completed in school, and that sort of throws a lot of that planning out of the window, because you suddenly have this mayhem that you have to deal with. So Bhaveen, would love for you to talk about how you take care of what I call a testing problem.
And I can just, before Bhaveen speaks,
Absolutely.
I'd like to share with you too. And we also have to wait for College Board to suddenly decide when they will have SAT.
I walked right into that one.
And then I have the entire cohort of parents telling me, now tell me what? I said, I don't know. I'll talk to Lisa about it.
This conversation is for a separate time. But I'll address that once.
Just to make everybody wake up.
My apologies, but we
It's a happy feeling.
I'm sure it is. We aim to please. Yes, Bhabhi.
How many of us here are CBSE? Following the CBSE?
Quite a few, I'm sure.
All of you know this very well, that all our mid-year exams happen in September. So if your mid-year exam is in September, then by 15th, so end of September, the exams lasted. And then within 15 days is the first deadline. That's 15th October. You have, up till last year, we had Georgia Tech, Michigan, Ann Arbor, UNC. And so the race has begun already. So even if you take in the 1st November deadline, the student between end of September, he has all of one SAT and one ACT to take. And usually, my students at least retake to improve their score. And then, if they want to put in that subject test, the last time they can manage it is in that first week of November. So that's a real crunch, because if they don't do it by the first week of November, the early decision will not consider those subject tests. And why do they take it at that time? Because as you all know, the SAT syllabus, subject test syllabus, is the same as your subject test and your So you're most likely, the student is most likely to get an 800 when he takes it in October. So this is the crunch. They got to juggle.
So, Bhaveen, what is it that you do to sort of manage that mayhem that occurs because of this testing schedule? You shared some ideas yesterday.
I have these counseling where I tell them, this is the way we can do it.
Right.
And throw in that last subject test, then finish your essay writing by this time, show me all this by here, this time. So I actually make the timeline for them, and we go this.
So you're better
this.
prepared.
And the parent, I make the parents sit there to know that's the timeline. So, and that they should not bother the student with when it's the time for studying for that subject test, because at that time you can't tell them that now essay bhi kar lo, ye bhi kar lo.
So you push the essays sort of earlier and make them work on that significantly earlier, essentially. Okay, fantastic. Those are sort of some themes, really, that we wanted to talk about. I'm pretty proud of the way we've managed this. We have about 15 to 17 minutes now for us to have an open conversation. Anything that's worked for you, any questions that you have for the panelists, let's open it out to the audience now. Okay, I'm going to moderate this. Is there someone here to help us at the back? Hi. Could I request you to just take the hand mic and help us move around the room? Thank you, dear. Perfect. There was someone here at the back. If you could introduce yourself, tell us your school and curriculum, that'll be helpful.
Okay, I'm Presija and I'm from Candor. We follow the A levels and the IB curriculum, and we have 3 batches of IB that have passed out. Again, I would like to go back to the testing problem, and it is a big pain because students do plan early, as ma'am pointed out. We have a timeline, and many of them do follow according to that. Again, the subject test, they do take it in November, because that's when they tend to score better. But I have seen this off late that students take the SAT first in the grade 11 October, then they do the January session, and then they're still not happy, and then they say, okay, I'm going to do an ACT again. And I feel that takes up a lot of time from their IB
That's
preparation,
right.
rather than just focusing on the ACT. How do we deal with that?
Any ideas on what you've done? I've typically heard schools talk about the fact that they make kids do that SAT versus ACT diagnostic much before the process of the real testing begins. What do your schools recommend to students?
Yeah, I strongly discourage kids from retaking exams unless they've got a really poor score and there is a scope for improvement. So if you show them the statistical data of past students, to show them that people who've taken multiple attempts haven't really made much improvement. Some have even gone down because they haven't managed their time well and it clashes with the school exam schedules or whatever it is. So if the first attempt taken is done sincerely with a wholehearted attempt, like there is no second chance, that's the ideal situation. I think all of us would, agree with that. That's an ideal situation, but no more than twice. Also, I think it's important to figure out which colleges you're applying to early, because there are some really good colleges which don't require subject tests. So if you make your list carefully, and then you can take your subject test by December even without really having to rush into anything if you've done an early action somewhere else. So I think, again, looking at the list carefully and looking at the students' capacity to cope with pressure and time crunches without really compromising on their school grades. At the end of the day, I think the school grades, all of us know, have far more weightage than the standardized test scores.
Yeah.
And so if they're going to compromise on the school grades, it's just not worth the compromise. So, looking at how strong the student is. So, going back to the subject test thing, if you think by taking the October test or the November or December test, you're going to get better marks. But if you've already got a 7 in your predictions or consistently getting a 7 in your IB, physics or math, then why stress even if you've got a 750? It just doesn't make sense to overwork yourself. So I guess it's a very case-to-case basis. And
great. Ms. Pramani, any thoughts on how you manage it? I know in the north especially, a lot of kids take SAT and ACT. How do you manage that process and that conversation early?
A lot of them do SAT, ACT, AP. I have a student who's done that and is dealing with his IB as well. And in addition to that, I can also tell you students who have not probably taken an extra science in IB and because wants to showcase himself, I know of students that they will specially go out of their way to do the subject test in that science subject. Now, absolutely the only way I have dealt with and is really informing them the time schedule and saying, well, and they have to kind of figure out themselves that whether they can deal with the multiple tests taking place simultaneously, and if it means doing preparation in advance, so be it. There, no matter how much we explain to them, there is probably a parental pressure or their own personal aspiration. I'm not able to control the number of tests they can take. And so the only way is, this is definitely one of my very important point I explain to, I do address when I'm dealing with grade 10 and 11, is this timeline and this kind of requirement, and this is how your preparations have to do. So if you need to start your preparation early, so be it. I mean, students in the north are preparing for IITs from grade 9 onwards. So if something like that has to happen, it has to happen. But then they must understand the pressures that will come up. I mean, there's no other way I could think of. I mean, if anybody has better thought process, please share.
Yeah.
So I speak from a university perspective because I am from University of Michigan Flint, and it's very interesting for me to be here and listen to the perspective from a counselor, from parents, from the students. And I wanted to ask, how do the students react when you try to involve the parent so much? Because in our experience, about I'm talking about the number of tests they take, or how many exams that you take. I think one way to deal with that is, as a counselor, you can tell the student, you are not just competing in the university for that one seat with just other Indian students. We look at international students world over. So, as an admissions person, when we are reading a student's application, yes, it's a holistic review in terms of their letter of recommendation, their statement of purpose, maybe even some schools require a different scholarship essay. We're looking at, scores, test scores, but we're also looking at that student vis-a-vis another student from yet another country. And I don't know if our students here today think about these things. So I don't think students should get caught up in that race where the more tests I take, the more competitive I will be. It's
Yeah.
always nice if the student thinks it's good for them.
No,
Yeah.
I'm coming back from there. It's not what, I'm not talking about who's thinking what. I'm just trying to put the sheet in front of the student, that these will be the timelines, these will be the pressure on the timelines, it's your choice. What the university is seeing is left, we are not touching that right now, because the students who are really taking multiple tests is definitely trying to prove himself, and I can't take away that from that child. I mean, if he wants to do it 3 times, it's all right. I mean, he believes he can do it. I mean, it's his responsibility and his grit to take it. My job is to tell them that this is how the timeline will look when you step in.
Yeah.
Please understand. So, and we are not forcing them, we are not encouraging them. It is just bringing the picture in front of them. What the university will look at is something to be debated.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is only a picture brought forward. And that we do that because they should not be a feeling I was not aware of it.
Yeah.
The school has this plan, the timeline of the school test would be like that, these will be the extracurricular activities, you will have to meet these deadlines, and should you be applying to selective schools, these will be tentative requirement, here is it. Now see how you can plan it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that's also the job of the counselor, right? At the end of it, it's not your decision. You can guide them, and you can tell them, this is my experience. I've seen all of these situations play out. At the end of it, the student has to take ownership. I think if you go back to that. One very quick comment I want to make before, I know a lot of you want to share your comments. One thing I've seen help, at least with the SAT, I've been with the College Board now for 5 years, is a lot of schools who are using the PSAT will over time tell me that because kids are exposed early enough to that exam, one, there's a likelihood that they might do less attempts on the SAT because they've had more practice, because sometimes kids will use the first SAT as sort of practice, which is not what it's meant to be, right? And the other thing is, it gives them a very real picture of what the exam entails. They're a bit more prepared. They know that this is not as easy experience as they might have perceived it to be, and they will automatically just start managing their time better because they've had that experience since grade 9 onwards. Could we have lots of mics? Yes, ma'am.
My question is for the letters of recommendation. When you were telling us about the letter of recommendation process, you said that you would divide the talent of the student, and something goes to some teacher writes about some student and about some talent, and some other teacher writes about someone. I am given to understand that the college is looking at, the admissions office is looking at a way to see that there is something that is resonating in all the letters of recommendation. So if you isolate the talents, does it look like there is no resonance? I mean, it does. Is it not detrimental to the student? Thank you.
You don't isolate the talent with such solid dividing walls that it sort of looks doctored, but you talk to your subject. So, if you're talking about physics, math, it's logical, analytical skills that are more focused over English, history, or the social sciences, where you talk about the subjective approach of the student. And so, without really making solid walls to separate that, this is what the teacher should address, this is just an indicator for the teacher to know that somebody else is already talking about this, so I'm not going to focus too much on that. But I completely agree. There is a common thread through the application, including the activities and the letters of recommendations and the essay that the student writes. So there has to be a consistency for sure. And I think that's where my role comes in. If I feel that a teacher's underplaying something or overdoing something or misrepresenting something because of her own biases, then I just step in and especially for inexperienced teachers. We have workshops, and I do sit with them with their letters of recommendation to sort of guide them on what would be considered consistent, since I see both the letters of recommendations that the teachers write.
I just want to ask you one thing. Do you find teachers feeling a little demotivated when they have to sit with you for letters of do they feel like the new teachers are okay, but do you think the senior teachers take a little objection to it?
There is some who are experienced and they say we know what we're doing, and I'm saying okay, that's your call. So it's not for me to micromanage something. In fact, that's the last thing I want to do because I have enough on my plate. But there is some who are really new and have just written for a couple of years or written in other schools where the ethos is completely different. And when we come to ask them, they see how our ethos is, and they just want to get familiar or in tune with what we are expecting. And so we also send them, yesterday in our session we also talked about weekly emails that parents I send them too. And we also send weekly mails during this time to teachers to sort of support them and encourage them and not make them feel, because we know how it feels. We're in the boat, so we give them little tutorials, little video clips where, there's not spending more than 5 minutes on the video clip, but we're getting some prompts on how to do it. And so we do it in a fun way. We don't do it in an overbearing level.
No, I will add,
But she's right, the old teachers do have their set ideas how to write the letter.
Yes, and
You can't clear out with them.
And I think I'll just add to that. In fact, I've had the experience of teachers actually wanting me to read their recommendations. Can you just read through it and see if I'm kind of being fair to the student? And that is something come very often. I mean, can you just help us out? I mean, it's sometimes if you can kind of put a little more responsibility that your recommendation is going to make the difference, I think that little bit comes in from the teacher perspective that I hope I'm doing justice to the student. So it does help. And it's just reading from a different perspective to see whether it's that I might find my material written very well, but when somebody else reads it, it may not sound as good.
Yeah. Shivangi, you're in a smaller city, so I think your teachers sometimes might have less exposure to this kind of work. Your thoughts?
That's what I wanted to just add to her question and Sudarshana's, that we want to keep this common thread across for all the letters of recommendation. So we tell them to focus, basically the behavioral or the characteristics of that child is what we try to keep rolling across all the letters, whether it's mine or it's the teachers or the head of schools. They all talk about the same characteristics and behavioral things. It's only those incidents that have happened in class which are highlighted by that particular teacher. So that is what really, to set them apart, that okay, in my physics class or in my economics class, this incident happened, or how that interest of that child is in that particular subject is what is highlighted. So when we're talking of the common thread and something that is common across for the universities to read, we keep that basic characteristic of that child alive in all the letters.
Fantastic. I think we have time for maybe 2 more comments or questions. It's 9:30 and I know the bell's going to ring soon. Could we have the mic here? I'm in a tricky spot if I have to pick and choose. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a very basic question. I think there are a lot of counselors in the room. So, we have especially schools that have large numbers of students, and I'm sure this is a skill I know that comes with time. But I'm new to the school setup, so I've had 17 years of experience in counseling and managing, foreign education companies and things. But specifically from a counselor's point of view, what I want to ask the panel: how do you follow the thread for each student? Because I know we have several meetings with parents, with students. There are lots of things that come up, and you do that in a day with so many different sets of parents and students. How do you follow their threads? How do you know next time when you meet the same parents, you recall the conversations you've had? How do you build on that? I think that is a huge skill.
I record every meeting, and that's what I talk about the paper and events.
Okay.
I have a folder which has a sheet for it's like a doctor's prescription.
Right.
I maintain a file, the prescription, and I always have my file for every student. I'm not a software person.
Right, right.
And I really believe in that. And
so
anybody can pick that up.
Does everyone do that? Right. Okay.
Ms. Shukla, could you use a mic?
I meet every single class in the 11th and 12th grade for half an hour a week. So I know the students in a context of the classroom, and I know them individually in individual meetings. So that I think makes it a little easier. We are a paperless office, so we don't have paper pen, but we have a file on every single child on our laptop.
Right.
We record all the meetings, we minute them, we send them to the parents to add their comments in case they need to add on it. And so we have a continuous thread of emails recorded on the student file.
Okay.
That makes
But somebody may catch you in the corridor and say, "Oh, ma'am, but I want to add."
Appointment.
So the other thing I know lots of comments, just one last comment. Is there a common resource for counselors where we can share best practices, or is that
We can start one.
Quite frankly, Bombay has a Bombay counselors group, and
Delhi
it's
has
amazing.
one too.
It's really amazing because everyone, we have meetings now and again, and we have a common pool of resources which we share with everyone. Education USA has amazing resources which they share, tutorials, videos. So you just have to write into them and they'll send you a whole bunch of tutorials, including college recordings. So all the colleges that come and visit them, they have recordings which you can just play for your students. So if you can't attend the session, Education USA, I think, has a gold mine of information which is just untapped. So
please do reach out to them. You have offices of Education USA in Delhi, Calcutta, Bombay, Chennai, Hyderabad and Bangalore as well. They're a fantastic resource. Please reach out to them. Zafina from USIEF and Tanushka were both here yesterday. If you do want an introduction, I'll be happy to introduce you. The College Pod has a ton of free resources on our website. There are days when I still look at something and I'm like, I didn't know this was here, but it's there. It's all free, it's exhaustive, use that. Zafina also took a fantastic initiative from USIF to start this WhatsApp group. You have to draw the line on how many messages you want, but if you're cool with getting a lot of WhatsApp messages, if you put the group on mute, that's fantastic as well. There's, I think, more than 100 counselors, somebody sends a question, 10 experts respond. So again, Kat Zafina, she'll be happy to add you to that group. 2 more comments and then I think the bell will ring. Yes, very quickly here and then we'll go
I just want the experts to answer one simple question. What is the perfect timeline for a student, ma'am? When to take a PSAT? How do you plan the SAT? Please help me with this thing. Actually, I need your guidance for that.
You might get 4 different perspectives here.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, to keep it very brief, send me an email and I'll give you my timeline.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
that's one quick
great.
answer.
That's great.
Very quickly, Bhaveen, I know your school is not doing the PSAT. A ditto? Okay. They're all being kind enough to share their email addresses. But on the PSAT and SAT, I can help you, hopefully. Yeah. And I won't talk about what the College Board recommends. I'll talk about what, in my experience, a few hundred schools in the country are doing. So I'm happy to talk to you about that. I know we have a jumping person here, so let's go there.
Hello, I'm Dr. Kiran, Coordinator and Career Counselor from BCMRA Model School, Ludhiana, Punjab. So regarding students' information that we need for filling all those, LORs and SOPs, what we do at our school that we have a online student profile that goes to the next class. So we have a full record of the student right from entry to school till the, pass out from the school. So that whole authentic information is available there. So that actually saves the last minute rush.
And who fills that in? Who owns that? Like, who actually puts the information
It's
in?
that class teacher who puts that information, and it's all academic, curricular, co-curricular, and attendance, and every
Everything
record is there. So that is the best document we have.
Is their online footprint of their existence.
Yeah.
Okay. We had a comment there. Yes, Vandana. Yeah.
I have a question now. Recently, since a lot of discussion, fruitful discussion is going on, I'm stuck up with a situation on LOR. Now, for the same student, when we asked two teachers to give the LORs or the expert their references, there are two different opinions for the same child. One is saying excellent, the other one says average or above average, two different subjects. So, how do we resolve such situation?
Just to put that a little bit more with examples very quickly, if a student has failed physics in the first term of grade 11 and then worked their way up from a D to a B till the last exam when they submitted the report, that teacher would be a great resource to write a letter of recommendation from, because you're looking at great determination and effort to bring yourself up. Versus another student where the child automatically got an A+ in that subject just because of a natural ability. So that's great too. And
I think the question is different though. For the same student, two different teachers, one is saying the student is brilliant, excellent, and the other teacher is saying it's very average.
Right? Physics,
yeah.
So my physics is my favorite subject and history isn't. So I'm going to struggle with history and physics is going to come automatically to me. So two teachers talk about the same student, talk about me with respect to history and physics. I think, no, in fact, I encourage my students who fared really badly and worked their way up to go to the teacher for a letter of recommendations. Always help them.
I think the key, and we discussed this at our training the other day, that you will always find something good in every student. So for the person who's giving that sort of average angle, maybe you can talk to them about talking about the sort of positives in that student and sort of throw a positive light to that entire situation.
Average yet something.
Yeah.
My name is Sunny Mahajan from Pratapal School, Pathankot, and I'll ask my questions in person, but I just want to take this opportunity. So let us all give a big round of applause for College Board and great counselors here.
Thank you.
For great informatory session.
Thank you so much.
So really appreciable. Keep up the good work that you're doing, because these are great counselors with great numbers that you're dealing and leading that light forward from one ray of light to another, and knowledge is power. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. Yes.
It's continuous learning is always there, but you're here, so we appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Sunny. Thank you. One last comment I think we had, or are we done? Yes, ma'am. I haven't put it up, but there was a question, can we have the contacts? I think all of them are very happy to share their contacts with you. I wasn't sure, so I didn't put it up. But please feel free to reach out to them. I have contacts of all of them. So if you ever need to reach out to any of them, please tell me and I'll be happy to connect you as well. Yes, ma'am.
PSAT does generate a lot of information, which Lisa had conducted one session. So I think that is really going to be the key to get these children better prepared for SAT. So when we are trying to rush towards these deadlines, this is one resource which everybody can tap and use.
Fantastic. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'm still waiting for the bell to ring, so. I know, the bell's not ringing,
So I'll
but
just
let's
add to this
let's wrap
PSAT
that.
thing. Now, off late, since like we always have Lisa very handy with all the information and all, so off late now what we've started doing is, during the university visits or career days, we've started involving all PSAT registered students, right from class 9th onwards,
Right.
even 8th. So at least they listen, they gain some insights into it.
Simultaneously, we take separate workshops for them where we emphasize more on their academics and activities, how to balance.
Fantastic.
And that's very important. After 10th, then we decide on their trajectory towards their US
sort of individual trajectories.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So this is how we have started.
Perfect. I don't want to cut into your snack, coffee, and chat time. So thank you so much for being a patient audience. We hope this was useful to all of you. Please come and talk to any of us during the breaks or the rest of the day. Thank you.